In 2017, there were 3,756 drug deaths in the UK, of which 2,503 were deaths caused by misuse of illegal drugs. That's 43.9 deaths per million. While this is not the highest in the world, it is one of the highest in the UK since 1993. Why is that? Surely, there are plenty of policies and laws in place to prevent that, right? We talked to LEAP activist and ex-undercover cop Neil Woods to find out.
I was a police officer for 23 years, and for 14 of those years I worked undercover. And I primarily investigated the organised drug supply. So I was basically trying to catch gangsters who would supply heroin and crack cocaine to sort of inner city areas. And what I would do is I would look to identify people who could be a conduit, who could introduce me to these criminal networks.
Let's have a look at the situation at hand. The current drug policy in the UK is from 1971 Misuse of Drugs Act and is essentially focused on law enforcement and punishment. Hence, any involvement with illegal substances results in prosecution, after which the offender may be offered treatment if tested positive for drugs. That, as an idea, doesn't sound that bad, right?
I mean, I knew very early on that the war on drugs couldn't be won, and that it was daft. You can never reduce the demand by policing, and so the people who supply that demand have to become more and more violent, more and more frightening in order to combat the tactics of police. So policing drugs causes and increases the violence.
Now, the current policy is based on experiments from the 60s where rats were kept in isolation and offered unlimited amounts of Class A drugs like cocaine, heroin, morphine, and amphetamines, resulting in many of the subjects dying from overdose. The test concluded that these substances were highly addictive and dangerous, hence they should be illegal. Okay, so why doesn't the policy based on that research work? What are we missing here?
The experiment in Canada, Rat Park, showed that if you provide everything else the rat needs, it doesn't go for the drug, and in every case the rat doesn't use it. So, as Johan Hari beautifully says, this shows that people who are addicted to drugs need connection with people.
So basically, this suggests that we have been basing our policies on the wrong studies for decades. However, the most burning question remains: what should government policies focus on to reduce harm?
A lot of problematic heroin users, most drug counsellors will tell you it's at least 2/3 of problematic heroin users are actually self-medicating for some kind of childhood abuse, either physical or sexual abuse. I would learn this because people open up to me and tell me their life story and how they got to where they were. Portugal had a real horrendous situation with enormous amounts of drug deaths. They brought in decriminalization, so they made a health-based policy rather than a punitive one. They now have, after only 16 years of that policy, they now have 3 deaths per million. In this country we have 46 deaths. So they have a fraction of the drug deaths that we do, and they've achieved that just in 16 years. But if you look at Switzerland is a good example. They have heroin-assisted treatment, so they prescribe heroin. Since they've been doing that, their burglary rates have dropped dramatically. Their shoplifting's virtually disappeared. And very interestingly, street prostitution is virtually gone in Switzerland because people have been rescued from sexual exploitation. Many of the opponents of heroin treatment will say, you can't give people heroin, they'll just keep taking as much as they want. Now this is an interesting thing because in Switzerland they do give them as much as they want. They're allowed to decide their own dose. And so for the first 6 weeks, and it's almost always 6 to 8 weeks, the people keep increasing their dose day after day, building the tolerance up. But because they've gone into treatment and they're getting this for free and they're not having to steal things to pay for it, they're not having to be sexually exploited, and there's space in their life for other things, they get to a point after 6 to 8 weeks and they think, oh, actually, I don't need to keep doing this. And they all reduce their own level, which I think is one of the most important facts or from pieces of evidence from Switzerland that people need to understand, that once you give someone the space and you look after them, then they don't need to keep chasing that high.
So, It is clear that heroin-assisted treatment and a more health-based policy have proven to be more effective in Portugal and Switzerland. Could this possibly be the right way for the UK? Many disagree. For example, Peter Hitchens, the Mail on Sunday journalist who gave a talk at the University of Essex.
Why should people who spend 40 hours a week working hard have to pay taxes to look after people who deliberately fried their brains and cease to be rational or productive or useful members of society? We've effectively had for 40 years in this country an experiment in drug decriminalisation far, far bigger than those much vaunted ones which have taken place in the Netherlands or in Portugal that people will doubtless mention to me this evening. And what is the consequence? Well, we don't exactly know because it's impossible to discover realistically the precise usage of drugs which are illegal. To legalise a drug which is known to be severely correlated with dangerous, lifelong mental illness. And what do we think of people who, knowing that, still proceed with this extremely active and expensive campaign? There are two things. First of all, if alcohol was illegal, and we knew what we know, and not in mass use, and we knew what we know about it, that was the situation. If such a substance was, if these things were known about it, or even strongly suspected, and it was illegal, and there was a campaign to make it legal, which side would you do? Once it's legal, more people will drink it, and more people will drink more of it. And they'll drink it also, they'll drink it younger. If something is already in mass use, and it's legal, and it's been legal in this case for thousands of years, it's virtually impossible.
However, can we honestly say that the current policies are working? If not, isn't it our duty to look for a better solution?
At the moment, government policy is about recovery. So the principle that someone must stop taking drugs and get over their addiction. I would say that it's a direct result of that policy that for the past 3 years we've had record increases in drug deaths, and we now have more drug deaths than road deaths in this country for the first time. As soon as you stop treating it as a punitive issue, you can afford all of the therapy and the counselling that you need as a society, because policing drugs is massively expensive, and whatever kind of health intervention is cheaper than policing drugs.
What do you think? Is the UK's drug policy working, and if not, what should be done about it? For more info, watch our full interview with New Woods and visit uklib.org.